All right, this is another edition, another episode, another show, whatever you want to call it, of the AFC East Bros podcast. Gary and Kyle here. We're talking all things in the AFC East as we do week in, week out, and because football season is officially underway, it doesn't really start until training camp happens, there is plenty to talk about. Camp standouts, camp disappointments, injuries, so much to talk about. And as always, you can call in 712-451-0011. The PIN number is 321-848, and a new addition to the show is we now have a radio feature. So I know this works for sure if you are on a desktop or a laptop. You can listen live to the show by going to a link that I will tweet and send out, and I will start plugging that link into all of our show descriptions as well. I'm not sure if you can listen via a mobile device, but if I figure that out, I'll let you know how to do that too. So I'll be sending that link out to listen live to the show soon. But it's another feature that we got going here. But as always, we want to hear from you guys. You can email the show, afceastbros@gmail.com, and we'll take your questions. Gary, my brother, how are you on this fine evening?
I'm doing well, Kyle. A little hiccup, but, you know, I'm doing well and glad to be on the air with you, as always.
Feeling is mutual, my friend.
And real quickly, I want to thank you and your wife, or my sister-in-law, rather, that tremendous gift you guys got me. I can't wait to wear it, and hopefully I get to wear it when you're around.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that gift?
Well, many of the Bills fans know, but the Jets, Dolphins, and Patriots fans might not be aware of it. So the Bills Mafia, really, and it's a few fans, they make select few shirts a year, and one of them, and they all have different type of themes. But this one was a very popular one. It was the Jurassic Park themed Bills shirt. Instead of having the Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton, it had a buffalo with the same moniker as the Jurassic Park, and instead of saying Jurassic Park, it says Orchard Park. Orchard Park being the township where the stadium's located. So I thought it was really creative and really cool, and definitely one of my favorite shirts. And I showed it to Ashley, Kyle, and she got a good kick out of it as well.
Yeah, Jurassic Park has always been one of my favorite films. I remember we watched it, I don't know how many times as kids, Gary.
Yeah.
You know, when Jurassic World came out this past summer, not this past summer, but obviously the summer before that, you know, I went to go see it. You gave me good reviews about it, but it's one of those films that we've seen so many times that we can quote many different quotes from the movie. It definitely was one of our favorites, and you know, I thought it was a great shirt as well. And I actually wanted to get it to you one summer earlier. They had a black version of the shirt, and by the way, we're talking about 26 shirts, which you know, some people in the Bills community, they make shirts with, you know, different types of designs, and I believe it's $8 for every shirt they sell. They give it to families that are in need, you know, whether it's someone who has some type of medical condition or what have you. And, you know, I had become aware of the Orchard Park T-shirt after the deadline to purchase this shirt was available. I mean, they have like you can purchase the shirt for about a week, and once that deadline's up, it's up. And I noticed, or actually, you know, credit to my wife, she actually noticed that they had produced the gray edition of the shirt, which was coming out for an extra week, and this had happened, you know, several months later, and, you know, we scooped that up in a heartbeat. So, really cool.
Quick, fast, in a heartbeat, Kyle?
Quick, fast, in a heartbeat.
All right.
Don't call my house no more. Some people have no idea about our inside jokes, but, you know, they will soon come to learn more about those.
Yeah. If you guys are listening to us long enough, you'll get that. So.
I'm not getting head off with your shoulder.
There he goes.
Well, yeah. Real quick, let's give him a little background on that particular sound clip. If you guys go on YouTube and venture on YouTube, there's when Kyle and I were younger. Kyle, this has to be so long ago, man. I would say even before high school, maybe right before I got into high school. We would go on YouTube when it first came out, and we'd listen to prank phone calls. and they would use Joe Pesci's voice to prank phone call. It would be basically sound clips of Joe Pesci, and they called this one guy. And if you ever Google or if you ever YouTube, Joe Pesci calls angry black man, that will pop up, and then you use some of his MySpace pictures. It's really funny. Don't take my word for it.
And it's not the actual guy's photos, is it? It's some random guy.
No. Those are the actual MySpace photos of the guy.
Wow. It's a classic.
MySpace.
I mean, I think that phone call existed on a website that was shut down, and then, it was such a classic that people were storing it on their hard drives, and then, they had saved the call, obviously, and then uploaded it to YouTube themselves, so it's here to stay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so much to talk about, and before we get into it, why don't we just get a guy who's been on hold since we started? Let's get him on from the heartbeat. I know he's dying to make a point, and I'll get him on because, he was actually helping me with some troubleshooting issues to actually, that radio feature that I was talking about at the start of the show. This guy was actually kind of helping me out a little bit, so let's show some gratitude to him. We're going to get on Mr. Kyle Fahey. Mr. Kyle Fahey, and by the way, sir, thank you for your help. But, I've noticed a pattern with you calling into some of these shows. You always try to get a couple extra minutes. Just one more point. You tried to do that last week with us. We ain't having that this week. When you're done, you're done.
All right. Fair enough.
All right, but Mr. Fahey, what's on your mind?
Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me on your show so early. And, I would like to talk about the whole Revis and Marshall situation. And I don't know what your guys' standpoints are, and I kind of want to just get this out of the way, because I've been told by my esteemed co-host Ben that it's an absolutely terrible take, that everybody's going to hate it. And, I just want to test it out with you guys, because honestly, I think it was childish. This is something...
So hold on. Kyle Fahey, you're using our show as a guinea pig for your show? Is that what you're basically telling me right now?
I wouldn't call it a guinea pig.
All right. Well, listen. We are a show that. No, we are a show of the people. So any topic is worth discussing if you deem necessary. But go ahead. Why don't you explain a little bit? Why don't you explain to the audience what happened, since they don't know?
Okay. So basically, this past week in practice, I don't know exactly what day it was. Maybe Saturday or Monday. I don't know exactly when it was. But, Revis and Marshall, they were going one-on-one in team drills. I wouldn't call it one-on-one, but they were going up against each other in team drills. And they were getting the best of each other at some point. Marshall was getting his, Revis was getting his. They were kind of getting fed up with it. They were doing good 1 minute, then bad next minute. And, Marshall beats Revis for like an 80-yard touchdown. It was only like 35 yards in the air from Fitzpatrick, based on what I've heard. So it's not like an 80-yard bomb from Fitzpatrick, so everybody just chill out there. Revis didn't really like it, so on the next play, he kind of jammed them. But if I remind you, this is the reason I don't really like it. Revis is coming off that wrist surgery, and he was only in individual drills for like a week. I mean, I'm still not sure he's 100%, and I think this is just terrible that Revis and Marshall are going at it. When Revis has this wrist injury, he's jamming at the line, then he comes up and hits him in the side of the helmet. Revis hits Marshall, according to reports. I just think that's childish, that's being unsafe, and especially after last year with the whole Geno and IK situation, it just gives the media another reason to talk about the Jets being a circus. And I absolutely hate it when we are called a circus. So I think this needs to change. I love competitive spirit, don't get me wrong, but when it comes to a player who is not 100%, and these are your best two players on the team, and they had to be broken up for fighting, I know Brandon Marshall's an emotional player. I know Darrelle Revis is an emotional player, but this is unnecessary. You're not fighting over a roster spot. You don't need to do that. I get it. You get a little mad. There's no reason to come up and hit somebody in the head on the helmet. And then Marshall was just as wrong because he went right back at him and pushed him. I mean, it was just childish. That's something you see in Pee Wee football. It's unacceptable.
Without a doubt. Kyle, why don't you start off, and then I'll give you my take on it.
I was actually going to let you have the floor first, but here's my thing. I mean, I know that this is going to be a topic of discussion in many instances. I am actually co-hosting Jet Nation Radio as soon as I get off of here, and I'm also going on to the Rockpile Report tomorrow evening. And Interestingly enough, both hosts of those shows want to talk about this topic. They said that this is a must-touch-on topic. But anyway, I mean, here's the thing. Here's why I'll agree with you, Kyle Fahey. There's no doubt that I'm not the hugest fan of this in the world, and here's why. Marshall is that emotional guy. He has a history of these things, and do I think that he's a changed man? Yes. Do I think he's the same guy that he was back in 2009, 2010, when he was running into domestic violence, instances, when he was, punting footballs and being a nuisance at practice and swatting balls away and not giving full effort? I don't think he's that same guy. But with that being said, Brandon Marshall will tell you, listen, mental illness is not something that just goes away. It's something that you have to constantly battle and deal with. And, his foundation and all the money that he donates towards, those efforts is about being aware of your condition and knowing how to handle it. So it's not to say that Brandon Marshall is, just completely, he's not susceptible to running into these types of problems again. No, he is. He has a mental issue, and we must commend him for his ability of trying to fight against it. But at the same time, you cannot look at this and say that's not a tad bit concerning, because at the end of the day, I don't want my player to be the guy who goes out there and throws a punch. We like to think about the leaders of the Jets, and one of our best leaders is Muhammad Wilkerson. And at the start of the 2014 season, the Jets were in Green Bay week 2. Muhammad Wilkerson threw a punch. There was a fight that started. He threw a punch, and he was ejected from the game. Right? So I don't want my players throwing punches in games. I don't want my players getting 15-yard penalties. Penalties can alter the nature of a game. I mean, we think back to the London Bills game, right? Now, there was a phantom, pass interference call, I believe it was on Nickel Roby. Gary, correct me if I'm wrong.
You're right.
But, if that penalty doesn't happen and Jacksonville doesn't get an extra set of downs, the Buffalo Bills make an amazing comeback in London and win that game. 15-yard penalties, personal fouls, they can alter a game. So I don't want my players acting like loose cannons and getting into fights and getting into big-time penalties like that. That is certainly alarming. But I think if you're going to take a positive out of this, listen, you got 2 veterans. And one thing that we know about training camp is veterans like to take it easy sometimes, right? You think back to Michael Strahan, if you watch America's Game on the 2007 Giants, Michael Strahan said, the best $250,000 I ever spent was missed in training camp that year. Veterans like to take it easy from training camp practice. On the John Murphy show the other day, they said that, I imagine that when the Hall of Fame game was canceled, some of the veterans said, hey, listen, this is great. We get to go back on the bus. You don't have to get hurt. So one thing is for certain is veterans take training camp practice a little bit more lightly than do rookies and roster bubble guys trying to make a team. So the fact that you got a 31-year-old Darrelle Revis and a 32-year-old Brandon Marshall going at it at practice, giving 110%, I think you have to like that, because iron sharpens iron, steel sharpens steel. Nobody ever got better off of not playing against good competition. Good competition, breeds the best. Gary, you said the same thing the other day. Competition brings out the best in all of us. So you like that aspect of it, but at the same time, you could still be competitive on the field and within the yard lines, but then once you go over to the sideline, you're throwing punches at each other. That to me is not cool. That to me, and Todd Bowles said as much, that's not acceptable.
Absolutely. And Gary, before you talk, I just want to say that's what I would add on to it. You basically summed that up perfectly. I love competition. You're right. You can only get better through competition. And veterans always get lazy. I love that they're going 100%, but they do not need to get injured, especially Revis with that wrist pressing up on the line. I don't like that as it is. And then you want to go ahead and slap somebody in the side of the head. And he even does that in games. My co-host Ben pointed that out to me. He goes, yeah, he does that in games. I mean, that's just what he does. That's a penalty. That's clubbing. You can't do that. And now he's doing it against, our best receiver, against arguably our best player. This is just unacceptable. I love the competition, but no way, Jose. This is not Rex Ryan. This is Todd Bowles.
Yeah. Real quick, like I said, I don't make a big a deal as a lot of the other media about that. I just, because this happens in every training camp. The only difference is this is two marquee guys going at it on a team. What I will say is I don't like the fact that Brandon Marshall really, I mean, no one's talking about what's the comment that led to the strike to the head.
Yeah.
You know, Brandon Marshall kind of poked fun at Darrelle Revis when he got torched by DeAndre Hopkins, and he pointed that out after he scored that long touchdown. So no one's really pointing that out. I think that is unnecessary. You don't need to point out someone's flaws or what happened to someone. They're two competitive guys, though, you know, and they're two competitive guys that are from the same area in Pennsylvania.
Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but like I said, I'm more concerned because it's Brandon Marshall, if anything.
Yeah.
You know, if this was Eric Decker and Darrelle Revis going at it, Eric Decker scored a long bomb, you know that...
I'd be concerned.
Yeah, you wouldn't be concerned. Well, you would be concerned that it was Decker that did it, but you wouldn't be concerned because Decker's a pretty even-keeled guy. With Brandon Marshall, the only thing about Brandon Marshall, he's always been a top 10 talent. But every place that he was at, he was exited out there not on the best terms, whether it was a trade, whether it was... demanding a trade or the team couldn't stand him anymore. You know, he never left. He didn't leave Denver with a good taste in their mouth. He didn't leave Miami with a good taste in their mouth. And he certainly didn't leave Chicago with a good taste in his mouth. So you hope that these old trends are fading fast. But with Brandon Marshall, you never know. I love his play on the field. I'm not the biggest fan of him off the field. For various reasons. But like I said, I wouldn't make a big a deal with it. I mean, like I said, it is what it is. Or if it continues to happen, then that's when you put your foot down and say, hey, listen, this is a huge problem. And Kyle Fahey and Kyle, my brother, I'll say this: what I'm kind of concerned with Brandon Marshall is not so much the Darrelle Revis thing. If this is true, which I've heard reports that it was true and heard reports that it wasn't true, is the bet between him and Antonio Brown with their cars. And I hope to God, for the Jets' sake, that it's not true, because that's going to put a lot of pressure on Ryan Fitzpatrick. It's going to put a lot of pressure on the offensive coordinator. You know, if Brandon Marshall is not going to be able to compete with Antonio Brown, because, shoot, let's face it, Ben Roethlisberger's behind the helm, and there's no Martavius Bryant. So, in that aspect, you're going to have a hot-headed Brandon Marshall. God forbid the Jets start losing. You know, this could be very cancerous for the Jets. I hope that bet is not true. I really do, because you know what? It's going to be a huge burden on not only Chan Gailey and Ryan Fitzpatrick, but the team as a whole, if that bet is true. Because and first of all, I don't like bets like that, Kyle, because bets like that, it's a team sport. You're just basically saying you're above the team by saying, hey, this is the thing I think I could do better than him, or I want to put my stats ahead of him. Brandon Marshall, the only thing Brandon Marshall should be concerned with is winning. Yep. Whether he catches 3 balls or 13 balls a game, the only thing he should be worried about is winning. That's it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And, Ben Roethlisberger's a way better quarterback. If this was touchdowns, I think Marshall would have a chance.
Exactly, but it's not that. It's not even that. It's he's the one who called the bet out, too. It's like, you know.
It's just, it's him. You know, it's the thing they're trying. I don't even think it was really him starting this. I don't think it's a coincidence that, you know, the Jets partnership is with Porsche, you know, and then like the day later, Brandon Marshall just says, hey, you know, your Rolls Royce for this Porsche, you know, yard. Honestly, I think this is some sort of social media thing that the Jets PR may have put together. I'm not necessarily sure about that, and I'm always a conspiracy theorist guy. I could be totally wrong, but I do think that's really the case. I do think Brandon Marshall actually could compete, though, because I'm really looking at it. Like you said, really their only threat is Antonio Brown. Now, Ladarius Green, they signed him in the offseason. He's a good player. Still don't know what he can do. I've seen a lot of good things at some points, but I've also seen a lot of really easy balls dropped. He's definitely not Heath Miller. He's not reliable like that. So I don't know what he's going to do. Le'Veon Bell suspended 4 games. No Martavis Bryant. Sammy Coates. He's definitely no Martavis Bryant. He's not to that level at all, at least in my opinion. So I think Antonio Brown's definitely going to get double and triple covered. And that could be a problem for the Steelers.
Regardless of that, who cares about if he could or he can't? The problem is there's going to be games where Brandon Marshall doesn't do diddly squat. I mean, you could look at the first meeting with the Bills. He only caught 2 balls for -5 yards. You don't think he's going to be happy or thinking about the bet in the back of his mind? Shoot, I'm going to lose my Porsche. Screw you, Ryan Fitzpatrick. You know, that's what I'm saying. Like, to me, I don't like bets like that in a team sport. It's one thing to say, hey, I believe my Jets are going to have more wins than your Steelers, you know, but things that you put a burden on the team, an individual stat, that's what I don't like. And I hope it's not true, but I'm hearing mixed reports. I actually heard that it was true. I heard that Antonio Brown, after he heard that, said, well, hey, Brandon, he's like, hey, if that is true, Brandon Marshall, you have my cell phone number, call me up.
Yeah.
And supposedly Brandon Marshall did reach out to him, so.
Yeah. All right, Kyle.
All right, well, let's get off of this if we want to move on to the next subject. Or just bring on Ben. I really don't care. I have enough talking about this.
Ben Blessington has not called in, so.
Interesting.
I tell you what, Kyle.
He probably heard you guys agreeing with me.
He
probably went back into his little corner, and now he's crying.
Yeah, you know, because we have that live listen feature right now. Maybe Ben Blessington is tuning in right now. We don't even know it. But anyway, Mr. Fahey, we got a lot to talk about. So I'm going to put you on mute. But, you know, if you want to still listen, you can. And, you know, if you have something burning, maybe we can get you on at the tail end of the show. But we got a lot of stuff to cover. So we'll talk to you later, all right?
All right. Thank you guys for having me on.
No problem.
Yeah. I'm surprised, Kyle, the Rock Pile Report wants you to talk about that. To me, it was one of those things I didn't even think it was noteworthy.
I mean, they said it's a must-talk-about topic.
It's to me, I told you, the bet was a little bit more disheartening than that, you know.
I would agree that I probably dislike the bet more. I mean, I don't gamble at all personally. And, yeah, like if you're talking about, I mean, I don't even do little simple bets like, hey, I'll do $5 if the Jets win this game. Like we're talking about, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line here. We're talking about, you know, maybe a quarterback alters, you know, who he's going to throw to, or maybe he looks at the receiver a little bit extra because he wants his guy to win the bet. I mean, you know, I think Fitzpatrick overall is a pretty smart guy, but, you know, these things, they do weigh on someone's mind every now and then, and I don't want to say that he's immune to it. So, you know, I feel like most quarterbacks might, or, you know, like someone like a Geno Smith might be more apt to fall into that, you know, like, oh, shoot, let me try to get the respect of Brandon Marshall and let me favor him a little bit more. Like, I feel like Geno would be a little bit more willing to fall into that than a Fitzpatrick, but I certainly don't think he's immune to it.
Yeah, well, Kyle, I'm going to tell you, an old Bills staff member said, I can't remember, he was on that year, this was after the Bills let go of Fitzpatrick and he was in Tennessee, and someone was on WGR and they said that, you know, Fitzpatrick, there wasn't a pass that he didn't like. So that means he would gunsling it and throw into coverage he shouldn't be covering, thrown into coverage he shouldn't be thrown into. There was never a pass that Fitzpatrick didn't like.
That's Ryan Fitzpatrick for you. But let's go on. Let's talk about your Buffalo Bills then. Let's talk about the big news out of Buffalo, which is the potential serious Reggie Ragland injury, the top-touted second-round pick of the Buffalo Bills. They swapped 2 fourth-round picks to move up to go and snag this guy. You know, many people were saying a first-round type of talent, came from the esteemed Alabama program, and, you know, you're talking about a Bills linebacking core that was a disappointment last year. He was one of those guys that was brought in to reinvigorate this defense, and, you know, there are reports out there, nothing confirmed, saying that he might have a partially torn ACL. Gary, how concerning is this to you?
Very, because, well, I mean, all right, I'm going to say very because he's very and not, if that makes any sense. One, you like to see the young kid on the field. You like to see him time on the job. You know, let's face it, Kyle. it's not only the Bills, but a lot of mock experts, a lot of people had first-round grades on Reggie Ragland. The Cowboys released their big board, and they both had first-round grades on Reggie Ragland and a few other linebackers that were taken later on. And one they happened to draft, the kid out of Notre Dame. So, you move up to get a potential first-round pick. I was completely on board with the Bills for doing that. And for all accounts, he looked pretty good, and he actually was flashing good in coverage, and he was looking the part up until he got hurt. But with that being said, Kyle, I think the Bills may have upgraded in a way. And hear me out. And I think you actually tweeted, and I was the same. We were on the same wavelength as far as our train of thought. I believe Zach Brown is a better coverage linebacker than Reggie Ragland at this point in his career, being a rookie. And I definitely believe that Brandon Spikes is one of the best run-stuffing linebackers in the league. And I think if you can use those guys as a combination, you would definitely get an excellent tandem or trio rather of linebackers. The only problem is that if an offense wants to say pass on first and long or whatever, and Spikes is on the field, well, you're playing with fire. If a team wants to run it up the gut, and I don't think Zach Brown's that bad of a run linebacker. He's not. He definitely thrives in passing situations, but really I think that Brandon Spikes, that's his bread and butter, and Zach Brown, you probably want him off the field at this point. I think that either way, if you could get it where they have a rotation and the Bills are playing it right, they might have upgraded as far as their linebacker core goes, in my opinion.
Yeah, one of the Bills beat reporters, Sal Majorana, he went and said that the Bills were really fortunate that Spikes was actually available. I mean, there's no doubt that Spikes he's not a particularly old player. He's 28, but you can still be a linebacker and thrive at 28 years of age in the NFL. But the fact of the matter is the only reason why Spikes was signed by a team is because what happened last offseason, which I can't totally remember what happened. I think maybe he hit a deer or something stupid like that.
No, he hit a parked car, Kyle. He hit and ran, and it was a hit and run, and he comes out clean and confesses just stupidity,
Yeah. And so it wasn't a matter of talent. I mean, he's definitely one of the best run-stuffing linebackers in the entire league, and Zach Brown, I don't know if you could say he's one of the best coverage linebackers, but he's certainly really good. You cannot argue against that. So you could argue very well that the Bills, if Zach Brown is on a passing down and the opposing team is passing, they're in a better situation having Brown out there than Ragland. And if it's a running situation and Spikes is out there versus Ragland, the Bills are probably in a better position as well. The problem therein lies is that the Bills' defense becomes predictable, and if you have a quarterback like Ryan Fitzpatrick, who we've said many times on the show isn't the best at making reads during the snap, but as far as pre-snap reads goes, he's pretty good, and he will check to a pass. If Brandon Spikes is in, let me check to a pass, let me hit this quick slant over the middle and expose Brandon Spikes in pass coverage, or Zach Brown's in, let me check to a QB draw or a running back draw and expose the Bills' run defense because of Brown's in. It does make the Bills a little bit more predictable in that sense.
Yeah.
And another thing that one of the Bills fans had actually tweeted at me yesterday is he said that the problem is exposing the need to sub, and quarterbacks like Tom Brady will exploit these matchups. And if you think about it last year, you think back to the Houston Texans game where the Bills obviously dominated that game. They did win, and Brian Hoyer's obviously a terrible quarterback, but they did score on the Bills while the Bills were making substitutions. And this is something that Rex has actually had a problem with all 6 years that he was the head coach at the Jets. Is he loves to get favorable matchups, so he likes to do a lot of subbing. And if you're doing this rotation of Brown versus Spikes versus Brown, and you're rotating them in and out constantly, you might catch yourself in a situation where the quarterback snaps the ball before the defender's actually in place.
Yeah. I'd tell you this, though, right now. Pro Football Focus has Zach Brown graded as a top 6 as far as pass coverage goes. Take that for what it's worth. I'm not saying that. But also, he did grade positive in the run department as well. What I'm saying to you is this, is that you definitely make Zach Brown your primary linebacker alongside Preston Brown. But on those nitty-gritty situations, you want Spikes there. And Kyle, not for nothing, Spikes is a smart player. He's definitely not the best athlete, far from it. But there's been a few times I've seen him, especially play for New England against Fitzpatrick. He's had his hands on quite a few balls. He's able to read better than we think. The only problem is I see Spikes, if you get that back out in space, it could be trouble. But, Rex Ryan knows his flaws. They said he's a true Mike. There's no bringing him out on the tight end. There's no jamming him up on, a wide receiver. He is staying aligned with the quarterback. He is staying aligned with the running back on the backfield. That's who he's going to be. So, yeah, I am concerned as far as the substitutions are going, but definitely, I like the fact that we have good depth at middle linebacker. And yeah, the Ragland injury, I hope it's not a partial tear, but if it is, I think I have a little bit more peace of mind that those two guys are in our linebacker room.
Yeah, and I was doing a little bit of reading yesterday on what a partially torn ACL could mean, and I think that Kiko Alonso might actually have had this last season where loose ACL and he was out for an extended period of time. So I don't know if that would be considered the same grade, but my understanding is that at best, someone with a partially torn ACL could be back within 8 weeks, more likely 12 weeks, and at worst probably like 16 weeks. So if you look at this, Reggie Ragland partially torn ACL right now, there's still about 4 weeks till week 1. At worst 16 weeks. He could be back for the last quarter of the season if the Bills are making a playoff push. Probably most likely he could be back for the second half of the season. So even if it is a partially torn ACL, it's not like it's a completely lost season for the guy.
Absolutely. And Kyle, real quick to that is, when does a middle linebacker, really translate to wins and losses? I don't really think that definitely it's a position of emphasis, but when we lost Kiko Alonso 2 years ago, when he went down with a knee injury, I mean, Kyle, he was our star rookie linebacker, and he went down, and we thought our season was done with, and then we bring in Brandon Spikes, and really him and Nigel Bradham flourished in Jim Schwartz's system, and we deemed Kiko Alonso expendable. We traded him off the next year. So I don't really think that an inside linebacker, I looked at the Vegas line the day we lost Reggie Ragland, our numbers were still the same. Nothing changed. It's not like losing a quarterback or an impact wide receiver. In fact, like I said, the Bills may have actually gotten a little bit better because of this.
Interesting take. All right, so we got a lot to cover, but as promised, we have to get this guy on. This is Mr. Benjamin Blessington. Does anyone call you Benjamin? Does your mom call you Benjamin, Ben?
No. Kyle, I'm a Benedict. Huh?
Oh, Benedict. Okay, my apologies.
There we go.
That's fitting.
There we go. How's it going, guys? It is currently midnight. My connection is body, so just continue if I got a little bit. But anyways, just call in, talk Tim Tebow in the MLB, and then I'll hang up.
We are not talking any Tim Tebow right now. As much as you might want to do that, we are not going there. But, Ben, I'm going to give you a chance to defend your position a little bit because I don't know if you were listening before, but your co-host, maybe he's the Benedict Arnold because he was kind of coming on here and subbing you a little bit. But anyway, he came on here and said, Ben, he tried to get on me because he said that I had a horrible take, and then he went on to justify his position. Anyway, he thinks that the Revis Marshall thing is a pretty big deal. He doesn't like it at all. And I think your opinion is that he has a horrible take on that issue. I don't want to spend too much time on it because we've already talked about it, but take a little time to address that.
I mean, well, okay, look, our show is basically like First Take. It's the Jet Take. We have our differing opinions, and I have bad takes, and he has bad takes. Kyle has more bad takes, and this is one of his worst ones. Look, okay, Brandon Marshall and Darrelle Revis are two of the top guys at their position. And in the dog days of August, they're getting a little physical. These are two emotional guys, two physical guys. I have literally zero problem with this. It can honestly, now look, my position on this and what I was saying earlier, and I was like, I'd much rather have this minuscule headline than last year's, I can't knocking Geno Smith out, or the year before that with Rex Ryan in the circus. Like, I'll take a Brandon Marshall this shoving match on the back pages of the New York Daily News. It's a non-story. I forget who tweeted it out. I retweeted it. Player said, I mean, you wouldn't understand this if you weren't a player, but this can only mean good for Brandon Marshall. Basically, I'm just happy they're both playing 110% in practice. I don't think it means circus. If anything, I think it's a positive thing. But Gary, Kyle, he said you agreed with him, so I'm interested to hear why you do think it's a big deal.
Well, Ben, I'll give you the brief version of what I said. You can obviously listen to the playback on the podcast. But what I said is I can see some good in it and I can see some bad in it.
So I probably will.
I can see some good in it and I can see some bad in it. The good is, here's why I agree with you, is, listen, veterans take it a little bit easier in training camp. There's no way Darrelle Revis or Brandon Marshall is going to get cut. They don't have to worry about that. There's no way that they're losing their starting jobs. So what we see from veterans in training camp is they tend to maybe go 80%, 90%. But you got two veteran guys, 31 and 32 years old, going 110%. And, there's the whole adage, iron sharpens iron, competition brings out the best in everyone. So Darrelle Revis said, quote, we got better from this. And I can definitely agree with the fact that playing against elite competition outside of you, that does make you better. But at the same time, it's not cool to me if your guys are, once you're out of the white lines and you're on the sideline and you're throwing a punch at your teammate who you're supposedly really close to, or maybe it was a swipe or whatever. I mean, that's not cool. I mean, if you do that to your own teammate, maybe you'll do that to a scumbag opponent that you're playing on a Sunday on the opposite side of the field that called your wife a nasty name. And if you throw a punch, you might get ejected from the game. Let's not forget, one of the best leaders is Muhammad Wilkerson. He got ejected in Green Bay in Week 2. So I don't want my players throwing punches at anyone, especially their own teammate. If you throw a punch at your own teammate, you might just do that to someone else on a Sunday. And I cannot have personal foul penalties like that.
I see what you're saying, but Brandon Marshall... Oh, sorry, Gary. You go.
Well, thank you, Bennington. Anyway, like I said, I think I don't think it's a headline grabber. I really didn't take much stock into it. This happens at every training camp with every high caliber athlete. They want to compete, they want to do well. The only thing I didn't like, two things. One, that what led up to Darrelle Revis throwing the strike at Brandon Marshall. Brandon Marshall, after he torched him for the 80-yard grab, he then proceeded to point out to Darrelle Revis how he got burnt by DeAndre Hopkins. I don't think that's right, throwing a low blow at your teammate. So I don't like that aspect. And the other thing I really don't like is that Brandon Marshall has been such a head case throughout his whole career. I mean, let's face it, the guy's been a top 10 talent throughout his whole career, but he's never been, let's put it this way, he's never left on good terms from any team. They've always wanted him out as soon as they can. And now we're year 2 under the Jets, and some of these things start to poke out. He was the great teammate last year. He was best friends with Ryan Fitzpatrick, yada yada yada. And now it seems like the old Brandon Marshall is creeping back out. The same guy that left Denver, Miami, and Chicago on bad terms is the same thing going to happen in New York. That's the only thing I could think of. But other than that, I didn't put too much stock into it. People would be crazy if they don't think that Sammy Watkins and Stephon Gilmore are at each other's throats every day, or vice versa. Any other high caliber player versus high caliber player. So I didn't think too much of it.
All right, Ben. Now let's move on to something else, and I'm sure that you and Mr. Fahey will go into this on Well, actually, never mind. You have someone else co-hosting your show this Thursday because you're still on vacation. Regardless, I'm sure that you guys at some point will still talk about this in a little bit more detail. But I want to go on to another topic. And last week when you were on our show, I asked you about, who was standing out at Jets camp. And now I want to ask you, who has disappointed thus far in Jets camp?
Well, I know tweeted something, I think, a couple days ago, and Gary was talking about Lorenzo Malden, and it was like something about how good Ryan Clady's been, and the reasoning is how many times have you used Lorenzo Malden's name. In the past couple of days, we started to hear his name more. He started to do more. At first, it was probably him because I was expecting such a big year from him, but again, it's up against a Pro Bowl left tackle when healthy, so it's probably not him. Probably Mark Williams. My number one disappointment so far. It's not like apparently he's just been getting burned quite a bit during training camp. It's not too worrisome because I still think we have good corner depth, especially if Dean Milner stays healthy. And I think he's going to be fine with his, but I was expecting him to be that number corner this year for sure. And it's more of the Buster Screen Dean Milner show. But I'm fine with him being a slot guy. Screen wants to move outside, or being the fourth string guy, or whatever. If he can't take that load, I'm fine with him keeping the role he had last year. But I was expecting a little more from him. But maybe we'll see it against other teams.
Yeah, when you're saying that he's getting burned and he's not been looking good, one name that came to mind, and I'm not sure that it's a great comparison, but it's Asante Samuel. You're thinking about a small, undersized corner, maybe the dreadlocks are playing a little part in it, who has good ball skills, but is not like one of those shut-down type of corners, not a particularly physical corner, and that's exactly what Marcus Williams is. Horrible tackler. If you remember the Oakland game last year, they put him out at safety, and he was whiffing on tackles left and right. Dude didn't want to hit anyone. And he's not. The reality is he's not that shutdown type of corner, and I don't think you want him starting opposite of Darrelle Revis. But I think he's a guy that you put him in nickel and dime situations, he can thrive. He can make pass deflections here or there, and he can pick off balls. So, but yeah, certainly it's a little disappointing to see that. You had spoke about Malden, and this is something that I had actually tweeted out, and I noticed that Gary had actually retweeted it. Is one of the Jets beat reporters said that, hey, Ryan Clady, you don't hear his name too often. And when you don't hear offensive linemen being called all that much, that means that they're playing good. Because typically you're only talking about a lineman when they're getting blown by and giving up sacks. But the reality is you haven't heard Ryan Clady's name. And, Lorenzo Malden hasn't been beating him. So one of the things that came to my mind is, well, Lorenzo Malden had a decent rookie year for being a third-round draft pick. But Todd Bowles asked him to put on a lot of weight because one area that he wanted Malden to improve in was, setting the edge, getting better in the run game, pack on a couple pounds to do so. So the thought that came to my head is, okay, no doubt Ryan Clady's been good when he's actually on the field, but maybe this also says something about Lorenzo Malden. Maybe packing on that extra weight has made him a slower pass rusher.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is a possibility.
It is.
But I mean, yeah, yeah, I think you're right.
There's no two ways about it. When you get heavier, you're not as explosive. It's a possibility.
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah. I'm trying to know what I'm going to say. If you remember in college, Lorenzo Malden wasn't necessarily this big pass rusher, and we weren't expecting it. He's a high motor guy. He's going to give 110%. And again, I think when you see him on the field, he'll still be a guy who can set the edge. I'm not expecting him to put up double-digit sacks. I'm expecting him to put up 3, 5. Just he's going to be that Calvin Page. We got a younger version of that. The guy who wasn't asked to do this much in college, but I actually am expecting it, and it's a lot to put on the weight of a rookie, is a guy who you have been hearing his name a lot, and that's Jordan Jenkins. I think he can possibly take on that pass rushing outside linebacker. I know he wasn't asked to do it a lot at Georgia. I know that was more Leonard Floyd's job, and Jordan Jenkins was more of a guy who just would eat up blocks. But from what I'm hearing, and again, it's just practice, so we're talking about practice here, I don't necessarily know how good he is as a pass rusher, but from what I'm hearing, it sounds promising. And I think that the core of Malden and Jenkins at the two outside linebacker positions, I think that can be a duo that the Jets can have for years to come.
All right. I mean, yeah, I've certainly been impressed with Jenkins. I mean, I thought from the very beginning that the kid could actually start, but it seems that he's actually exceeded my expectations, Gary.
But here's my thing, and I know you guys, it's great to be excited about young players, but who else do the Jets have to start? I mean, what is his really true competition, Jordan Jenkins? And another thing that kind of bothers me about Jordan Jenkins, he's laying up against all these backup right tackles, but he really hasn't gone against the true test, and that is Breno Giacomini. And once Breno gets on that field, he's going to bully Jenkins down the ground. There's no two ways about that. So stop being so excited about Jordan Jenkins until Big Breno gets on that field, and let's see what he does then.
You make an excellent point, Gary.
Point. That is a good point. I guess Jordan's been feasting the right side, and Lorenzo's had the tough assignment at the left side, because the left side of the Jets' offensive line is fantastic. The right side needs some work.
Benedict, any other camp disappointments for the Jets before we let you go?
If I have to think off the top of my head, I mean, not really, actually. I mean, it's a positive thing to say. I guess I'm a little disappointed in Breno Giacomini not being healthy. Actually, I do have one more. I'm kind of disappointed in Brent Qualley. I thought, and I obviously many Jets fans didn't have that high of expectations for him. But for me, I thought possibly if he played well enough in training camp that he could possibly unseat Giacomini. We could cut Giacomini, get some cap room going the season. He hasn't done that, and if he was going into the start of training camp, he was going to roll with the ones while Giacomini was hurt, and he's down to second string with Ajalana taking the starting reps at right tackle. Which is another disappointment. I thought Qualley had some promise with his size. But besides that, those are two kind of minor positions, I guess not Marcus Williams. That's kind of a minor one. And Marcus Williams, I'm not too worried about because I think he has his niche. And Lorenzo Malden, I'm not too worried about either. So, you know what, for right now, I think the Jets are in a good position. One last thing before you do let me go is, Gary, I wanted to get your thoughts on this because I actually was one of the people who I was okay with this. It was Tyrod Taylor doing a flip into the end zone. I mean, I don't want my starting quarterback doing that at practice, but do you at least like the heart and I guess guts that Tyrod Taylor is showing? I mean, we're talking about Brandon Marshall and Darrelle Revis giving 110%. This is an example of Tyrod Taylor doing that. Are you a fan of that, or are you more?
Of course, I'm not.
More like Rex Ryan.
Well, I don't want to see that. And first of all, he didn't do a flip because he was celebrating that he got into it. He got upended, all right?
Yeah.
So he was trying to dive into the end zone. So it wasn't a flip by choice. No, you don't want to see that. It's one thing to show guts and grits and, determination, and you like that. You want that in your quarterback. But, this is practice, and this is to get better. When the game's on the line, I have no problem with that. But the game's not on the line. You're playing to get better. You're not playing to win at practice. But, and it's funny. When that happened, there's a sound clip of Richie Incognito during practice. He's like, I got to hire a baseball coach to teach him how to slide this off season, So there's definitely a lot of concern with that. But thank God he didn't get hurt. But, yeah, you like seeing it, but you don't want to see it in a practice setting.
Yeah.
Hey, Rex Ryan hired Joe Girardi to teach him how to slide, so, maybe Rex can, pull up the phone book and call good old Joe Girardi. All right, Ben, we're going to let you go. Hey, listeners out there, if you want to listen to two young, fiery Jets fans go at it and have their little own Jets version of First Take, well, give the Jet Take a listen. They're on Thursday evenings from 8 p.m. till about 10 p.m. every single week. You can follow them on Twitter at the Jet Take. Let's see, I don't have their phone number memorized off the top of my head, but you can find all that stuff by going to their Twitter page at the Jet Take. They're on iTunes, Stitcher, all that good stuff. And Ben, we thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Ben.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's always a blast.
You gotta go get back on the banana boat.
You got to work on your sound bites, Kyle. Come on.
Ben, I don't want to hear it. Take care. You guys over at the Jet Take, you both play the soundboard and you play two things at once, and then you're like, Kyle, I'm already playing it.
Because I'm the one who's supposed to press it, and Kyle likes to do it, and then he's pressing play, and I'm pressing stop, and it's a mess occasionally. But thanks for having me on.
No problem.
You better go get back on the banana boat.
All right.
Hey, Kyle, one thing, man, I tell you this. Ben Blessington is never short on superlatives about his team. Amazing left side of the offensive line. Superior pass rusher in Jordan Jenkins. Man, he needs it. I wonder how he describes his favorite foods that he likes to eat.
He's a passionate fan, and he wants to see the Jets win, as do I. So, anyway, let's talk and let's shift, because we've been doing about 50 minutes right now, strictly Jets and Bills, and let's talk some New England Patriots right now. So, news broke out in New England today, cause for concern. Despite the fact that New England Patriots are good every year, it seems that they win 12 regular season games every single year. They've done it for the past 7 seasons, 5 straight AFC championships, yet Patriots fans always seem to be disappointed. They always seem to want more. They always seem to be on the ledge, about to jump off, because they think that the sky is falling. But that never seems to be the case. There was room to be overreactive earlier today. Julian Edelman went down with a foot injury, and we saw that a foot injury sidelined him for many, many weeks last season. Reports come out that it doesn't actually seem all that serious, and it could maybe just be scar tissue coming off, but his actual foot is fine. However, Mr. Rob Ninkovich, a mainstay of the Patriots, a very solid player, contributed for sure, a guy that you thought might be phased out this year had they hung on to Chandler Jones, but they didn't. They traded him away. Rob Ninkovich certainly should see major playing reps this year, but he goes down with an apparent tricep injury, MRI withstanding. We still don't know the exact details yet, which could sideline him for the entire season, despite the fact that Rob Ninkovich in each of the last 6 seasons has not missed one single game. A very healthy player. So losing a player like this, Gary, after you've already lost Chandler Jones, seems a bit concerning for me.
A little bit, but like I said, I don't think his role is going to be that big this year. I think that they're going to lean heavily on Jabal Sheard, Chris Long, Trey Flowers. I expect his role to step up a little bit this year. I do think, though, don't get me wrong, there is a spot for Rob Ninkovich, and he's kind of like their gadget linebacker. You can play him on third down, you can play him on first down. He could kind of do it all. He's like their version of Manny Lawson to us. But I tell you this right now, it is disheartening. But Kyle, the beautiful thing is the reports I'm reading right now, he's not going to miss the whole season. And this is an injury that doesn't need surgery. It needs rehab. So he'll probably miss till the end of October, they're looking like right now, to get him back. What I am concerned, though, is Edelman. Now, they're listing him as day-to-day, but if this keeps flaring up, who knows what's going to happen. I don't know if, we've seen these constant foot injuries keep coming back. So that would be a bigger blow than, let's say, Rob Ninkovich.
Yeah, and one thing that you notice with certain wide receivers is they can have recurring foot problems, something that doesn't go away. And, we've talked about Devontae Parker, his young career. On several instances, he's, back on the shelf, back in the trainer's room because of his foot surgeries. And, Edelman, he's not getting any younger. He's getting close to 30 years old now. It seems to be a recurring thing. But, maybe this just is an issue of, scar tissue wearing off, and it's not that cause for concern. But I think that, as a Patriots fan, you have to be worried on, a down-in, down-out basis. Oh, is this guy going to get hurt? As a Jets fan, I know that the way that Chris Ivory ran the ball last year, I was constantly concerned that he was going to get hurt. And sure enough, how many times did he tweak that hamstring? How many times did we see him right at the beginning of a game, getting his hamstring stretched out? Sometimes when you have a player like that, they're just susceptible and prone to injuries.
Yeah, but let's just face it. I mean, Edelman is their best receiver besides Gronkowski and Martellus Bennett. So, and I didn't realize that percentage of targets, Edelman gets even more targets than Gronkowski. So it's a big thing. He is whether people want to admit or not, he is a big weapon for Tom Brady and company. And it's going to be a blow if he can't fully heal from this foot injury. Now, like you said, it might have just been scar tissue that flared up. Let's hope that's the case for the Patriots' sake. But either way, you gotta be concerned.
Yeah, for sure. And you notice that the Patriots' offense at the beginning of the season, when they had Edelman, when they had Gronk, when they had Deion Lewis, was clicking on all cylinders. You were thinking, and statistics, if you were to add it up and compile it over a 16-game stretch, what might happen, you were thinking that Tom Brady this year, he might break Peyton Manning's record from back in 2013, 55 touchdown passes. He might shatter that. He might shatter, his passing yardage record as well. I mean, you were thinking that. But when Deion Lewis and Edelman went down, that Patriots offense, still very good, but it was a shell of its former self.
Yeah. Definitely was, Kyle. He's a big factor in that. Him along with Deion Lewis, like you mentioned, Gronkowski, and Edelman. That's the main passing attack right there. Martellus Bennett, Chris Hogan, those guys are just cherry on top of the sundae. But when getting all three of those guys in the field, New England's a pretty dangerous opponent to go up against.
Speaking about cherry on top of the sundae, Ben Blessington just tweeted at us from the Jet Take Twitter account and said the ice cream in France is earth-shattering with an exclamation mark. So apparently he's living up.
I tell you what, he describes the Jets maybe having the best roster of all time. Oh, wait.
I think that I'm pretty sure the reason why he tweeted about the ice cream in France is because of the way that you described food, because he didn't leave immediately after I muted him, so I know that he heard you say that.
Well, that's good. I'm glad he's hearing my words and hearing how ridiculous he sounds at times.
Speaking of Rob Ninkovich, one of the things that you said is he just needs rehab. There's no surgery required. And that got me thinking of a tweet that I saw from a Patriots fan earlier. We better call Ray Lewis up and get some deer antler spray. You remember that? You remember that whole thing back in 2012 when the Ravens went on their Super Bowl run, and Ray Lewis, he apparently tore his triceps or partially tore them and used some deer antler spray, and he wasn't suspended or anything like that, but miraculously he was able to play over the rest of the however many games for that current season.
Huh. I don't remember that. That slipped my mind, but interesting. Deer antler spray.
Deer antler spray. And apparently that is on the list of banned substances, I think. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that it is. Hey, Gary, what do you get of this story? Patriots special teamer Nate Ebner is actually in the Olympics right now, playing for the men's rugby team. Yeah,
and he actually helped the men's team beat Brazil today, from what I understand. And I saw Patricia sporting his jersey. Hey, listen, represent. I mean, like I said, to have an Olympic athlete on your team, that's great.
Yeah, I think it was pretty cool. Like another AFC East player, and it'd be interesting. How many players in the NFL were vying for an Olympic spot this year? These are probably the only two, but another guy, Marquise Goodwin, wide receiver of the Buffalo Bills, he also made a run at it for track and field, but I believe that he was cut and did not make the final men's roster. But anyway, Nate Ebner, I think that he's not a major. I think he's a bench player. And the United States, I think they had a doubleheader today. They lost to Argentina earlier in the day, but I believe that when Ebner came in the game, that's when the United States started scoring. And as far as I'm concerned, I think that Belichick made the entire team watch one of Nate Ebner's games.
Huh. Well, that's great, because let me tell you, he's one of their better special teams players, and to represent the country. And you know what? Even Rex Ryan was saying on the podium, saying if Goodwin made it, they were going to give him the green light. You have our blessing. They want him to do stuff like that. to represent your country, I think it's excellent, Kyle. So I'm glad the Patriots embraced him rather than frowned upon that he went.
Yeah, 100%. Because no doubt he's going to be in shape, in conditioning shape, but there's a difference between football and, some type of other shape that you might be in, and especially just, being in the shape of things in terms of knowing the playbook and the different schematics and what the team wants to run this year. No doubt that when you miss time, it's going to hurt, but the fact that not only the Patriots are allowing it, but endorsing it, making the entire team watch the guy, and it wasn't just Matt Patricia. I believe that Belichick was also sporting a number 12 Nate Ebner jersey as well. But anyway, let's talk about who has stood out at Patriots camp. Have any names stood out to you, Gary?
The usual suspects that look pretty good. Garoppolo doesn't look bad. Kyle, a few guys that are pointing out they're staying out for the wrong reasons, though, are guys that I'm kind of disappointed on. I thought were going to be big contributors. One being, let me say one positive thing. Cyrus Jones, their second-round pick, looks excellent as far as returnability. I don't know what he's going to contribute as far as being a cornerback this year, but as far as punt and kickoff return, looks like he's been razzling and dazzling a few fans and really showing out his stuff. Keep in mind, they're enjoying practices right now with the Saints. But a few names that stuck out for the wrong reason during these joint practices of a guy that we thought pretty highly of, and that's Malcolm Brown. Supposedly, Brandon Cooks really got the best of him this practice. So that's a little disheartening. And another name, Kyle, that I really thought was going to step up and be a factor in the passing game is Chris Hogan. Chris Hogan is not panning out for the New England Patriots like they thought he was.
So you bring up some interesting names, and it's so easy to get these guys confused, Malcolm Brown and Malcolm Butler. Malcolm Brown being the defensive tackle from the University of Texas.
I'm sorry, Kyle.
No, I do the same thing, and actually a lot of people do that. But Malcolm Butler, this is actually the second year in a row with these joint practices with the Saints that Malcolm Butler has gotten cooked by the cook himself, Mr. Brandon Cooks. But from my understanding is that it was worse last year, and we heard all this hype about Malcolm Butler last year, because everyone wanted to know about him. He was doing all these Verizon commercials. He was a Super Bowl hero, so he made a lot of noise last offseason. And then he carried it into training camp, and he was a big talker last year. And he was kind of like, he was jawing at Brady, in practice. But he was kind of, for the most part, backing up the talk. He was actually walking the walk as well. But one guy that has seemed to get under his skin is Brandon Cooks, small, shifty receiver who, he's not just a small, shifty receiver. Let's not forget, Brandon Cooks ran a 4.33. That's 10/100ths of a second faster than Sammy Watkins in the 40. Now, does that mean that their playing speed on the field is that much of a difference? No, you could probably even argue that Sammy Watkins is definitely the better deep threat. He's definitely shown that in his career. But Brandon Cooks is no doubt a very athletic, good player that probably needs to be utilized a little bit better in New Orleans. But yeah, he's definitely beaten Malcolm Butler, and Malcolm Butler even admitted, hey, listen, he got the best of me today, and we're going to see what happens tomorrow. But as far as I know, I haven't been hearing much good out of Malcolm Butler anyway. Even Patriots players have been beating him.
Yeah, we think about Aaron Dobson, a guy that could potentially be cut, has kind of been making his name off of Butler this throughout training camp, especially in the mini camps as well. He really got the best from them, And Kyle, I was kind of telling, I forget who I was speaking about, but it seems like to me a lot of the times is that these players that they practice and you look at them practice and they don't seem that good, but when game day comes on, they're on this whole new level. I don't know if they're just not thrilled to be in practice, but practice to me is where you get better. And seems like to me that Butler, I don't know if he just looks like the player that he does on the field. I don't know what it is. Every year, though, in practice, we hear that he's not looking great.
Yeah, I feel conflicted about that because I heard that he did look really good last year, but I'm not hearing the same thing this year. And maybe it's because, typically you hype a guy up like we come to, because Malcolm Butler was a Pro Bowl player last year, we expect now to hear good things about him. He's in the conversation for top 10, top 15 cornerbacks in the league. So we expect to hear good things of him now. Maybe it was just a matter of last year because, he was a relative unknown. He was only really known for that one play, that when he was standing out at practice, people hyped him up even more. So there is something to be said for that. But one thing that I'm not hearing is I'm not hearing the same type of jawing, the same type of enthusiasm that he exuded in practice last year, and maybe that makes you wonder. Maybe is he not as hungry anymore? Because he was also getting beat in minicamp. Let's not forget. But in my eyes, he still should be hungry because this is a guy that is still on an undrafted rookie contract. He's looking to get his first big payday.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I don't know. You also, Kyle, got to take with a grain of salt that this is the opportunity where they're supposed to be getting better. And maybe, Kyle, we've been hearing in Bill's minicamp that Ronald Darby, he's been looking great the last couple of days, but early in the camp he wasn't looking so good. But one thing he emphasized to the media is that he really thrived in press coverage, but he really wanted to focus on working off of his off-man coverage. He felt like that was a big deficiency in his game. So take into consideration this, that you take the time to work on the things that you're not so good in during these practices and during your off season. So maybe Butler is trying a few new things out. Maybe he's trying to get out of his comfort zone. So, don't look at it as like, oh man, he's totally slipping up. Look at it as where he's probably trying to improve on things that he's not so good at right now. We all have strengths, we all have weaknesses, so I'm not throwing the towel in Butler.
Yeah, me neither. I really like the way that he competes, and I think he's a very good corner. Even when he got beat last year, he never really got beat like a drum. You think back to, when Decker beat him for the game-winning touchdown at MetLife Stadium. Butler was right there. It's not like he got completely torched. You think back to when, Watkins beat Revis in the first matchup. He kind of really tossed him to the side like a rag doll. Or you think back to, when Sammy, faked an inside cut and then made an out route, and then Revis, went and slipped in Buffalo in Week 17. He was completely, I never really see Butler get beat like that. And then you think back to how well he played against Odell Beckham. He gave up the big, long touchdown. But other than that, he was locked down on Odell Beckham, one of the best young receivers in the league. So, I don't think the Patriots fans really have much to be concerned with Malcolm Butler. But another person that you brought up was Chris Hogan, and it's interesting. I'm hearing conflicting reports about him. One thing that seems to be for certain is the guy is dropping the ball, which comes as no surprise because, Reggie Bush, has nicknamed him 7-Eleven. He's always open, and I don't think for Chris Hogan it was a matter of, whether or not he could get open. I think he's always done a decent job at that, but it's whether or not he can catch the ball. And he has made those spectacular catches, but then again he'll make those Brandon Marshall type of concentration drops every now and then. And he seems to have a lot of those in Patriots camp thus far. He has gone out with a shoulder injury, but then some people are, I don't know how well this guy has played. And I would say some of the national media members are really hyping up, where some of the local Patriots beat reporters are a little bit more down on him.
Yeah, and you see that, and I actually like to lean on the local guys because they're usually the most critical and the hardest, especially on the coaching staff, on the players. So I lean heavily on, someone like a Joe Biscali rather than a Mike Rodak. Either way, I think that Hogan has not earned what they thought he was going to be. They really looked at him as like this safety blanket, third down guy, and he hasn't quite got into that yet. Not saying he can't. It's still early. He's probably still trying to get the kinks out of the playbook, but he's not being proven to be reliable. In fact, I did not read. I didn't see. I got to admit, I did not see the Patriots depth chart, their unofficial depth chart that seems like every team's releasing this week. But I heard that Chris Hogan is not high on there, so to speak. So I don't know if that means anything. I don't know if Belichick's trying to send a message to Hogan. But, you know, he definitely needs to step his game up.
That's interesting. You know, but I also wonder, like, how much can you really read into a depth chart? I think that Miami just recently released theirs.
Get that.
And I think that Jay Ajayi is on top of the Miami depth chart, and we've been berating this for weeks that is not going to happen. Arian Foster, if healthy, is the clear number one.
Did what's his face call you out, though, when that depth chart came out, when Jay Ajayi was listed number one?
You talking about Nick?
Yeah.
No,
Nick was swearing that Ajayi was going to be the man, the bell cow there.
No, he didn't. Not at all. But who knows? Maybe he'll call in. But you brought up another name as a camp standout. And I actually had this guy as a disappointment. And for the same exact reason you praised him. And no doubt that Cyrus Jones, when he has the ball in his hands, can do amazing things on the punt return. But Gary, the problem is this guy is dropping punts left and right. I mean, he's having a dropped punt every single day. And that is a no-no to Bill Belichick. I mean, for me, we had Jeremy Curley as our returner the past couple of years, and Jeremy Curley did nothing as a punt returner his entire career except for the one game that we went to, 2012 home opener, Jets versus Bills. He had a 60-something yard punt return. But other than that, he never did anything. He was just known for fair catching the ball. He could catch the ball. That was it. And for me, you know, I at least had some peace of mind when he was back there that he wasn't going to fumble it. You know, I knew that he wasn't going to get us any yards, but I could deal with the fact that I know that he's not, because when you fumble a punt, you're giving the team the ball back in potentially the red zone or potentially the 30-yard line, at least in field goal range, and that is a drastic, you know, change of the game right there. You do not want that happening. So if Cyrus Jones can't learn to catch the ball, he's not going to even be the Patriots' punt returner this year.
Yeah, I did hear that he was dropping a few balls, but I tell you this: when the ball was in his hand, he was explosive, and he was making plays with the ball. Maybe he has Leotis McKelvin syndrome, Kyle, where he is a good returner, but you worry about can he actually get the ball. From what I read today's, the joint practices, he looked good. In fact, he looked explosive. They were the word they used. But I guess it remains to be seen now. But they're relying. The reason why he was a second-round pick, make no bones about it, he wasn't the best coverage corner in college, and he wasn't even worth, in my opinion, a second-round pick at that for just being a covered corner. The way his value really soared is also in the return game, kickoff and punt. So the Patriots are definitely looking at him as being the man. And if he doesn't shape that up, like you said, you might get someone like a Jeremy Curley who's just going to be a fair catch and make sure he just catches the ball.
Yeah, I don't think that the team wants to put Edelman back there. I mean, maybe in a playoff game, a do-or-die situation, they might put him in. He's certainly a very good punt returner. You think back to the amazing return that he had in the Super Bowl year against Denver. But, I think with Edelman's injuries, you want to, just keep him on the field on primary downs for the offense. Yeah. Now, let's talk about camp standouts for the Patriots, and then let's talk about camp standouts for some other teams, particularly the Dolphins. But who has stood out to you as, impressing at Patriots camp?
Right now, I really like, and it's probably going to be really cliche, but I really like what I'm seeing out of Garoppolo right now, Kyle. They had a period, and I think he actually performed better than Tom Brady on 11-11 this past session. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but when I was reading it earlier, he did get a pick. I remember that, and I remember Tom Brady also getting intercepted as well in this period. But it seems like he's getting a good grasp of the playbook, and he's really taken over control. He's being very vocal from what I'm reading, and and following on Twitter. And, he's really kind of embracing that these 4 weeks it's going to be his team. And I like that. I mean, I don't think he's going to be Tom Brady. And I think that we need to clarify that, like Bill Belichick, the talks of him possibly being the guy to replace Brady is just ludicrous at this point. But you got to like what the young kid's doing right now. And, it's going to be his team, and he seems like he's embracing that role tremendously.
Yeah, I must say that, and I've cited this before, that particularly Sam Fahey and some other national guys are really down on Garoppolo and think if you're a Patriots fan, you need to be alarmed that he is the quarterback. But as far as all the local guys that are tapped into the Patriots, I can say that on certain days he hasn't been particularly impressive, but I would say that, he's been okay. I haven't been hearing bad things. He's been relatively good. And, the Patriots the past couple of days, some of the practices have been a little lackluster. So Bill Belichick, wanting to get the best out of his guys, he's had scrimmages. And, Brady takes one half of the team and then Garoppolo takes the other half. And as far as I know, that they were kind of neck and neck in regards to that. So that's just interesting right there.
Yeah.
And they've been doing things like bucket challenges, and I think one time Tom Brady absolutely destroyed him, but I think another time Jimmy Garoppolo was kind of, at least competing with him. But Tom Brady is the ultra competitor, and he's, kind of screaming and shouting and all that type of stuff while they're doing that. And, what does Brady have to prove to him? But it's just interesting. But I think that he's been okay. As far as someone that has kind of stood out to me, I would say would be Joe Thuney. And actually, when Ben called in a couple of weeks ago, he's like, what kind of under-the-radar young guys do you think will have an impact in the AFC East this week? And I think he was coming at the question in terms of fantasy value. But when I thought of the Patriots, one name that came to mind was Thuney, and I've watched a couple of his games. And this guy was known as a versatile guy that can do multiple things, and he seems to be slated to start at left guard for the Patriots. He played left tackle in college, but he's been very solid. And there's no doubt in my mind that, Scarnecchia, the Patriots offensive line coach, wanted him pre-draft. And the Patriots had an idea of where he might go, and the Patriots knew that, and they traded back, got a couple extra picks, and knew that they could select Thuney with their first third-round pick. But he's done good. He's really impressed a lot of people in Patriots camp.
Yeah, you know what?
Go ahead.
I'm glad you mentioned him, Kyle, because I was actually thinking that Thuney has stood out for all the right reasons. He hasn't gotten beat too much, and, that's always a good thing. And like you said, that I think that he's really going to earn that left guard spot as a rookie.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're the Patriots fan out there, you had to come into this offseason. Obviously, you wanted to add, a solid running back. You had no running game last year. Even when you tried to run it, you tried to run it however many straight times in Miami, only threw the ball 3 times in the first half. You want to be able to run the ball. But the biggest concern in my eyes was what happened in the AFC Championship game. You let your franchise quarterback get pummeled 20 times. And I get it. That Denver defensive line is ferocious. But if they were going against some semblance of a solid offensive line, there's no way that they hit him 20 times, especially not with Brady's quick release. But the biggest reason is because that offensive line was putrid, particularly in pass-blocking situations. Shaq Mason, pretty good in the run game, but not a pass blocker. But I'm sorry, this Patriots offense is a passing offense. So it certainly seems like Thuney is primed for that spot, and I think if you're a Patriots fan, you're happy about that because you want to protect Brady. Another guy that stood out, Chris Long, he's been flashing a little bit. I kind of thought that he can give the Patriots a little something, but I thought that he was more so washed up. But he seems to be doing pretty good.
Yeah, Kyle, the thing with Chris Long is this. It's not because he's one of those high motor guys, and he plays that way, but really, he's been banged up throughout his whole career. And he's one of those guys that revs hot, and it's kind of like he has an even level. What you see is what you get. He's not a very explosive guy, but he's a constant guy, and he's a constant, he's a constant professional too. I mean, the guy comes there to work. I think he is going to be impactful for the Patriots. I don't see him having a 10-sack-plus year. And if he does, it'll just probably be around 10 sacks. But he's not going to be that guy is going to be jumping off the charts. But really, I think that the Patriots got a good find in a savvy veteran who, yeah, his best days are probably left behind him. I mean, keep in mind, he was drafted in 2008. But still, I still like the guy. I like good veterans like that. And he has been playing pretty well throughout this training camp.
Let's go and let's talk about some Miami Dolphins. Who has stood out at Dolphins camp?
Kyle, well, before we get into that, I just want a little nugget with the Miami Dolphins. They just signed Chris Culliver to a 1-year deal. And that's big for them because I think this is a guy that Chris Culliver, keep in mind, is not a good corner. I don't think but I think he is a serviceable. But I think he might be an upgrade over Byron Maxwell, to be quite honest with you.
I wouldn't say Byron Maxwell, but whoever they got starting at second corner, I certainly think that that's possible. I mean, you're talking, Xavier Howard just had meniscus surgery, so that's going to set him back. Young corners struggle to begin with, and this guy was such an up-and-down corner, he's going to miss a lot of training camp practice. I mean, you want to thrust that guy into your number 2 corner spot? So I think that, signing Culliver makes him better than whoever they would have at the number 2 spot. But from what I'm hearing, Maxwell's been okay, and I think a lot of that is because of the defense that he's playing in. He's playing in a defensive scheme where he has at least had some level of success before.
Well, and let's just talk on that right here, because I think a name that people are kind of sleeping on is Tony Lippett. I think that he might have been playing better this training camp than Byron Maxwell. But as a whole, Kyle, you're asking me a standout. I'm going to say the defense as a whole, really, the times they were going live against Tannehill in the offense, Kyle, they had a live scrimmage this past weekend. It was not good for Miami, especially their offense. Adam Gase described them as sleepwalking, their offense. So, as far as that, it does not bode well for an offensive coordinator who's now the head coach that this is now their team.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. And it is interesting, how things can change around. I mean, the Jets' defense last year in preseason, and Bowles is a defensive coach, rookie head coach. He's got a specialty in defense. They looked awful last year in preseason. But, they were pretty good all season by and large last year. And let's take the Dolphins, for example. Gary, they were tearing it up, their defensive line last preseason. There was those reports when they were scrimmaging against the Carolina Panthers that the Panthers coaching staff told the Dolphins, take it easy, dial it back a bit, And what happened, Gary? The Carolina Panthers went on to play in the Super Bowl, whereas the Miami Dolphins were one of the laughing stocks of the league. So it's interesting sometimes how much stock can you put into these things. But again, though, we were thinking Miami had a better offense than defense just from a pure talent standpoint. But then Adam Gase is an offensive-minded head coach. Surely the offense should be better, right? But, as you said, those scrimmages, the defense was winning out. And it really is interesting, to be honest, because they have a couple nice defensive players, Sue, Rashad Jones. But outside of that, I mean, Miami defense, nothing to really be impressed with.
Yeah, I mean, and Kyle, I kind of rely on you heavily for as far as what's coming out of the Jets camp. I kind of do my own research on Miami and New England. From what I understand, in live settings with at least New England, there was a lot of back and forth between the offense and the defense. There's days the defense looked good. There's days the offense looked good. Buffalo is the same case, Kyle. I think that there's days where the offense really got the best of the defense and vice versa. I don't know what your take is on the Jets as far as that goes.
I mean, you're 100% spot on. It's kind of been back and forth, offense and defense. offenses had their days. And, when you think back to the early Jets training camp practices of the Rex Ryan era, 2009, 2010, 2011, the defense always dominated. I mean, the offense never stood a chance. But now we're seeing more of a balance. And you also have to keep in mind, 2009, who were the Jets wide receivers at the beginning of the camp? Chancey Stuckey, Jericho Cotchery, Mark Sanchez, a rookie starting quarterback, Kellen Clemens as the other guy competing. So versus a very talented defense, to say the least. But, there definitely seems to be more of a balance in terms of talent with the Jets. I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing that now.
Well, yeah, but that's what I was trying to get at. When I read Miami reports, it's all defense. It's all defense. Occasionally there'll be a flash in the pan where the offense had something going for them. But majority of the time, I'm reading that the defense is really getting the best of Tannehill and company.
Yeah, I've read the same exact things, which is concerning if you're a Dolphins fan because, you have to ask yourself, and I don't think most Dolphins fans think like this. Most Dolphins fans are very impressed with Gase. They're very impressed with how he's handling the media. He's not taking some of their nonsense. He's certainly not Joe Philbin. That's a positive. That has to be yeah, for sure. But his offense last year didn't blow the doors off of anyone. And maybe you ask yourself, well, all that success that he had in Denver, was it because of Peyton Manning and having elite wide receivers and, a solid supporting cast around Manning? You have to at least ask yourself that question. Although I don't think it's accurate, it is at least a cause for concern. Why is the defense, out of all these four teams in the AFC East, the only one where the defense is winning, practice in, practice out, is the Miami Dolphins? Has to be at least a tad bit concerning because you figure Tannehill in his fifth year, Gase is brought in to fix him. Where's the fixing? Where is it? As far as camp standouts go in Miami, a guy that has stood out is none other than Andrew Franks, a guy that came in last year. Caleb Sturgis was a draft pick for the Miami Dolphins, and I cannot remember exactly where he was drafted. I think it was a relatively early pick, at least as far as special teamers go. I think he might have been a fifth rounder. Gary, help me out here if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Fifth rounder? Okay. Sturgis had a bad season. Franks last year came in. They had a kicker competition. Franks beat him out. But in that competition last year, they were both shaky. Both of them missed kicks here and there. Everything I'm hearing, Franks has not missed a single kick this year in camp. So, as a Dolphins fan, towards his end of his tenure with the Dolphins, Carpenter was missing kicks, just like he did in Buffalo last year. Then you had Sturgis, who was shaky. But maybe now, the kicker position, whereas it was a cause for concern before in Miami, maybe it's now a point of strength.
Yeah, if you're a Dolphins fan, you got to be happy. And I'm sure that they're going to – hey, let's face it, Kyle. I could say this being a Bills fan, that, Carpenter definitely probably lost us a few games or definitely put us in bad spots. To miss six extra points is just ridiculous. I think that's a position – it's almost like you being an NBA player. Your job is to shoot baskets. And when you're at the foul line, I'm going to be quite disappointed if you miss a free throw. So same thing with a kicker. You want a consistent kicker. And from all accounts, Franks is looking really good right now. And like I said, the Jets got a little bit of a battle going on in their training camp. The Bills had one really early. It seems like Carpenter kind of already sealed the door on that, though I do hear that Jordan Gay has given him a run for his money late. But Franks, it looks like there's some stability now as far as the kicking position goes for Miami.
Yeah. Other standouts, particularly at the wide receiver position, even though the offense hasn't looked good as a whole, we've heard some buzz around these guys' names. Kenny Stills and Jakeem Grant. Now, I have said, I've argued with Ben about this. Oh, Jakeem Grant, he's the fastest guy in Madden. And I said, well, is he the shortest guy as well? And I think that he is. I don't think I need to say anything else other than about Jakeem Grant. I mean, yes, explosive, fast. What can you really do with him? He's not Tyler Lockett, and he's not sure-handed.
We've seen these players before, these small, quick guys. The Jets had one last year, Dree Archer, Trenton Holiday with the Denver Broncos and several other teams. These guys come a dime a dozen. But can they catch the ball? Can they play out space? What is their position? Are they a running back? Are they a wide receiver? Even Devin Hester, Kyle, had a hard time carving a niche out as far as him being a playmaker on offense. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, this guy was undrafted for a reason. You know, you could look at his size, but we've seen small guys get drafted. Tavon Austin, Marquise Goodwin. You know, there's guys that get drafted, but they're able to run routes. They're able to catch the ball consistently. So I'm not on the Jakeem Grant hype train right now. I think he gives you something in the return game, but it'd be hard-pressed to see how you get him on the field. You'd have to really manufacture plays for him.
Yeah, and I don't think that you want to do that. I think that offenses that try to get guys touches like that, oftentimes they're more unsuccessful.
They fail miserably. They definitely do.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting name in Devin Hester, and there's no doubt that this guy could at least be in conversation for a Hall of Fame bid in terms of his return ability. I don't think that he'll get there just because I don't think much returners make it, but they always try to carve out a role for him in the offense. And despite the fact that training camp after training camp after training camp, he had tons of reps at receiver, he just never became a good one despite having elite speed and some elite football skills. Just didn't really translate into being an offensive, productive player. But what about Kenny Stills? Now, a lot of people will say that, with Stills, it never was a matter of talent with him. It was a matter of effort. And it seems like Kenny Stills has put in a good amount of work this offseason to become better. And, we heard a lot more buzz about him early on in camp and in minicamp. It seemed to have died down a little bit, but by and large, he has impressed this offseason. I don't know if we can attribute that to Adam Gase's offense versus how Joe Philbin was using him, but he seems like he is primed for a better year in Miami.
Yeah, and I'm a big Stills fan. I really like that kid. The problem with Stills is he's not a complete player. He has a hard time in press coverage. He's an excellent deep threat. He's a good route runner, to be quite honest with you. He gives you zero in the running game. If he can offer a little bit of improvements in those areas, I think you could see a lot more playing time. Other than that, he's going to be a limited player. I've been hearing great things from him from camp. Him and Parker, I've been hearing good stuff out of those two guys. I think that Stills is going to be a role player. I don't see him being on the field. I don't see him being that constant guy that's going to be, maybe pushing. It's going to be Parker and Landry are going to be your two wide receivers, but Stills will be that deep threat. And he'll continue to be that deep threat, which he's not going to fool anyone, Kyle, because teams know when Kenny Stills in the game, he's probably going to go down, go up top.
Yep. Let's talk about who has stood out at Bills camp, Gary, and I think that one name you might bring up would be Mr. Greg Little.
Yeah, Greg Little, listen, the Bills in particular have been clamoring for that big body wide receiver. It kind of seems unfair. Keep in mind, I think Sammy Watkins is a lot bigger than what he's listed. You look at the guy, he's a big guy. He's got long arms, and he plays a lot bigger than that. But really, I'm talking about a guy who's just a big guy. And Greg Little, Kyle, I showed you, you like to use this tool a lot, that web system. What's the name of the website?
Mockdraftable.com.
Mockdraftable.com. There's their plug. If you look at his web compared to several other players' webs, he's in the realm of Julio Jones. Kyle. And the only problem is that Greg Little had the hardest time of catching the ball. He was known for, he was almost like, Kyle, I don't know if you remember this name, David Boston. You remember David Boston?
Oh, yeah, of course. The big steroid user.
Yeah, well, David Boston, huge guy, incredible vertical. I mean, he was a nightmare with the ball was in his hands. But the problem is he had a lot of drops, and eventually that led to his demise. And I think Greg Little's made an effort to really work on that and really has carved out a role for himself at Bills camp. And keep in mind, he's a second-round pick. If you ever watch any of his college highlights, you're going to be quite impressed. And you know what the thing I like most about Greg Little is he's a tremendous run blocker. I think that's an element that goes unknown and kind of unintentioned with a lot of major media outlets. That they don't pay a lot of attention to how does a wide receiver do as far as the running game concerned. And if you're the Buffalo Bills, you know the running game is a huge aspect. So I really like Greg Little. I hope he can salvage his career. He's still young. I think he's only 26 years old. So, but yeah, we need a big body wide receiver. And Greg Little is, coming out of the combine, 6'3", 231 pounds. He looks a bit leaner than that. I would say he's probably about 225. Looks about that right now, but still a big guy.
Yeah, and for people that are not familiar with it, we've brought it up on this show on several occasions, but it's worth a plug, particularly around draft season. If you're ever curious to know, sometimes you take those combine measurables and you don't know what is a good 3-cone time. Well, there's an interesting tool called mockdraftable.com. The guy that runs it, I think his name is Marcus Armstrong. He's actually a Jets fan. He's a software guy. Basically, he takes all the combine numbers of a particular player and he plugs them in a system and he makes what's called a spider graph. And basically, it compares your measurables to other people at the same position as you. And basically, the bigger your spider web, the more athletic your player is. So I'm looking at Greg Little right now, and yeah, I mean, he's right at the tops in terms of broad jump, vertical jump, bench press. I mean, 27 reps. He's in the 99th percentile for that. I mean, that's a lot of reps for a receiver. Don't know how much bench press really helps you. I guess it could help you get off a jam, but
well, you know what, Kyle? I love, and this is what I'm just gonna pause you real quick. To me, the bench press is it shows how much effort he's put in the weight room.
I would agree with that.
I think that just shows his work ethic right there. Because we see all the time these big ogre offensive linemen, 21 bench press. Like, what has he been doing all off season? You're telling me a 300-plus pound guy can't do 225 more than 25 times? You got to be kidding me. So it really shows an effort, I think, that he puts in his work ethic.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So, yeah, you can have a lot of fun, just looking and, sometimes stacking up, common, perception like, oh, how fast is this guy? They say he's fast. Well, what did he run? And how fast is that in comparison to other historical players? Like I always thought Matt Forte was a slow guy in terms of a 40, and I pumped in his mock draftable thing, and he actually had, in terms of running backs, a pretty fast 40 time, a 4.44, I believe, which is, pretty darn quick. So it's interesting. It's a fun little tool. Not going to spend much more time talking about that, but who else has stood out at Bills camp?
Kyle, and as much as Greg Little, everyone wants someone. The Bills fans are clamoring for that number 3 wide receiver, Kyle. It's been the most interesting battle, thus far at camp. And I can tell you this right now, a lot of Bills fans, they want Leonard Hankerson to be that guy. They want their 7th-round pick from a year ago, Des Lewis, 6'4", to be that guy. They even want Greg Little, the former 2nd-round pick who has the great size. But, Kyle, I knew this was going to happen, and I've been telling you, Kyle, this name. He's a good player when he's on the field. And that's none other than the former Olympian, Marquise Goodwin, Kyle. Marquise Goodwin has made some of the most explosive plays in Bills camp. He's a small guy. He's 5'9", 183 pounds. He's all of that. You know, he's not a pound over. He's not an inch taller, but he's got good hands. He's a good route runner, and he's got scary speed. He's got elite speed. I knew Goodwin could be a good wide receiver in this league. You got to pop on his tape of the Senior Bowl when they were doing one-on-one drills. Kyle, there wasn't a corner that could guard him, not one. And you know, he's a tough matchup for any corner.
Yeah, when we think about scary speed, you know, he flashed with that when the Jets played up in Buffalo a couple years back. And, you know, Cromartie is one of those guys that's known for getting beat by the double move. I mean, you think back, they had Todd Bowles mic'd up for week 1. Coach Bowles is warning him, Crow, watch the double move. Crow, watch the double move. And sure enough, Travis Benjamin, a guy who's got good speed in his own right, beats him with a double move for a touchdown. Alan Hearns did the same thing in the Jacksonville game that I went to. I mean, Cromartie, at least at this stage of his career, doesn't have great speed. But a couple years ago when he was playing with the Jets, at least a little bit faster, Goodwin didn't pull a double move on him. He just straight beat him down the field like a drum. And E.J. Manuel, of all people, beat him with a bomb for a touchdown.
Yeah. I really hope Goodwin gets it. I'm on the Goodwin team. I hope he could stay healthy because I think he alleviates, Kyle, I've sent you this in a private text message, I think he alleviates something that the Bills fans kind of overlook, and that is the ability to give Sammy Watkins with the ball in space and make him be able to create and actually stop using Sammy as your deep threat. Even though he's good at it, let someone else take that pressure away from him so he could be the prime receiver that we know he is. You know, the Odell Beckham, Julio Jones, the Antonio Brown, the guys that just, when they get the ball in their hands, they start making moves with it, and they really get creative with their route running. I hope it's Goodwin. And I think Kyle, thus far, he's been the best receiver, not named Woods, not named Watkins.
Yeah, and I was interested, I don't think that you brought this name up, and I'm surprised you didn't, is Greg Salas. I've heard a bunch of good things out of Bills camp with him. We can't forget, Salas came in, I believe it was week 17, Gary, the very last game. The Bills had went down with all those injuries. Salas came in, had 3 first downs in that game, close to 45, 50 receiving yards, something of that extent. He was a solid contributor despite the fact that he wasn't in that complex Greg Roman offensive playbook early on in the season. He learned it on the fly, and he seems to be flourishing right now. And Gary, let's just say this. Greg Salas, all the training camps that he had with the Jets, he was always good there. There's no doubt about it. It was when the games actually came on that he was a disappointment. You know, he dropped a touchdown in the Week 1 game against Oakland, but he's been impressing at Bills training camp. So I was curious that you didn't say his name. And you know, when I think about all these guys not named Woods or Watkins, to me, I think of the most solid guy as being Salas, even though he doesn't have the receiving credentials that Hankerson has. He doesn't have the elite speed that Goodwin has. I just look at Salas as being solid despite the fact that he hasn't really put it together, at least not for a long period of time. That's always why he's gotten cut.
Yeah, you know, he's definitely had a good camp. I'm not going to say, though, if you go back and you look at guys like Sal Capaccio, guys like Joe Biscaglia, Mike Rodak, the name that they always mention that really stood out is Goodwin. And Salas has had a good camp, not going to lie, but you also notice that Salas is a very limited role. They only put him at slot. There's no put him outside. There's no, he's not the number 1, he's not the 2. He's primarily a slot guy. And he only comes in certain packages. So keep in mind, while Watkins has been out this whole time, he's only returned to practice yesterday. It's been Goodwin and Woods out in the field all the time. And then occasionally Salas will run with the number 1s as a slot. But they've also, Kyle, when Watkins did return, they had Goodwin at the 2, Watkins at the 1, and Robert Woods at the slot. So you got to, that's kind of, you know, concerning if you're Salas. So that's something to note right there. You know, Greg Little, these guys have all been playing on the outside. Salas is primarily slot. I still think Salas will make the roster, Kyle, and I think that he does give you something in the slot. So he definitely has had a good camp, no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's interesting the way that the NFL is moving. You're continuing to see bigger and bigger guys in the slot, and Salas is a decent-sized guy, 6'2", about 215 pounds, versus traditionally the slot guy was that 5'10", 5'11" guy, really shifty.
Right.
But you want guys that are multiple. I mean, Eric Decker, you can play him on the outside, and you can play him in the slot, and he can thrive in both roles. But if Salas isn't giving you anything on the outside, then yes, his value is a little bit less.
Yeah, and staying with the offense, Kyle, I know the Bills fans, some of these guys don't want to hear this either, but Reggie Bush, from all accounts, has been very explosive, especially in open space. People are even saying that he looks like he hasn't lost a step. Now, I don't think that's true, but make no bones about this, Kyle. As soon as Reggie Bush signed with the Buffalo Bills, he made the 53-man roster. And it's interesting enough, I think they're going to use Reggie Bush in that gadget type of role that Percy Harvin had last season in this offense, in this Greg Roman offense. I think he fills that void.
And one of the things that Reggie Bush said is, what he was doing out in San Francisco last year is actually really similar to what Greg Roman does, because let's not forget, before Greg Roman came to Buffalo, he was in San Francisco. So apparently the coaching staff, which the head coach Jim Tomsula was with Greg Roman, they were on the same coaching staff, carried over a lot of those same principles. So learning the playbook was kind of a natural transition for Reggie Bush.
Yeah.
Hey, Gary, for these last 10 or so minutes, let's keep up with the theme of ranking certain position groups in the AFC East. And now we're going to talk about tight ends. And, Gary, there is such a huge gap between the number one and the bottom three teams. And, Gary, who is at number one?
Do we even need to announce this? I mean, it's without a doubt the New England Patriots. And not only is this the number one group in the AFC East, Kyle, it's the number one group in the NFL. Let's make no bones about that.
Number one by far in the NFL. I mean, you have a Hall of Famer right in the prime of his career, Rob Gronkowski. And then you have Martellus Bennett that, is he better than two-thirds of the tight ends in the league? Could he be a starter for two-thirds of the teams in the league? You could certainly put that question out there. I mean, and he's a big dude, and it's just scary, the red zone potential that these guys have. I mean, Gronk is a touchdown machine. He basically, when he's healthy, he's averaging about a touchdown a game. And then you throw Martellus Bennett in there. Whew.
Kyle, real quick, you're the Jets defense coordinator. What do? Do you line a particular person on them? If they're both out, let's just say they're both outside, it's goal line defense. Who do you put out on there,
I mean, I think you double Gronk, you definitely jam him off the line, and that's the guy that you put two people on. You take your chances with Bennett. I mean, if you have to put, everyone likes to point to when Calvin Pryor, when they split J.J. Watt outside, and obviously J.J. Watt is much bigger than Calvin Pryor. He went up and deflected the ball. Now, Bennett obviously has better skills than Watt, but you take your chances with putting a guy like Pryor on Bennett, but you don't take your chances doing that with Gronkowski. You think back to the Week 1 matchup where the Steelers came into Foxborough and, Gronk was put in motion. They put him out at wide receiver, and Brady just throws up the fade to him, and the linebacker's covering him. The linebacker didn't stand a chance, and I mean, you do whatever you can to put multiple bodies on Gronk in the red zone.
No doubt. Yeah, it's just a scary proposition when those two are lined up. That's one thing I'm not looking forward to when we play New England is those two guys. Seeing number 87, number 88, it's going to be very interesting how Rex Ryan, how Todd Bowles, how Vance Joseph, how they all play these guys.
Yeah. Well, we just got a phone call, and it is none other than...
We got to make this one quick.
We got to make it super quick. Right at the tail end. If I could just get him on.
Are you loyal to your team? Are you loyal to your team? Are you loyal to your team? Are you loyal to your team?
This team has taken me through my cancer and all my friggin' eye surgeries.
Wow.
And that's the bottom line. They keep me alive every day. And you know my personal story, Bob. So this story means diddly squat. Stay loyal to the Patriots. And that's all I get to say, Bob. I love you. I'm going to send you a personal message. And hopefully I'll see you in Phoenix.
All right. Nick Baby Love. Hey, we got to make this super quick, Nick.
No, I just wanted to say hello to Gary Sr. and to, obviously, Gary Jr. there and you, Kyle, you know, and it's all about the AFC East brothers, man, 247-365.
There we go.
Absolutely, Nick. Hey, Nick.
Nick, we were missing the love last week, man. We got no love last week.
Oh, no, well, you get it. I had a bunch of things to do, you know, take care of my health situation and all that, so I've been trying to get to the phone for the last hour, but I was on the phone with people. One thing to do, Kyle, I know, call into the on the NFL Network. You know, of course, all the team. Are the Jets playing them Thursday?
Yes.
Yep.
So, and what about Buffalo and Miami's Friday? I know.
Yeah, Miami's Friday, Buffalo's Saturday, and Kyle, New England is.
I think the Thursday.
Thursday as well.
That's what I wanted to tell you. It's my good friends Andy Hart and Paul Perillo, writers, and for the Crafts, you know, for Patriots.com, and you know they do various shows. Comcast Sports Channel, New England are on there. They'll be on TV on the NFL Network. What?
Yep, doing the preseason games. Yeah, I know that they get the preseason games every year, so definitely going to tune into them. They're two of the best in the business. And
yeah, and you can call the pregame show, man. So we want to get the word out on the AFC East brothers. That's our objective. Gary, as me and Kyle talk all the time, that's really the objective, man. I just wanted to check in and make sure you send that love to Gary Sr., and, you know, I'll definitely call earlier next week.
Thanks, Nick. We appreciate that. And I will call into the Patriots pregame social. So, again, Nick, thanks a bunch for calling, and we're going to continue with these tight end rankings. All right. So, Gary, we got a little bit less than 5 minutes. We got to finish up the tight end rankings. And, again, shout out to Nick Baby Love. You know, whatever medical condition, you know, his cancer, nothing could keep him down. He keeps fighting. He's strong. He's loyal. Despite the fact that he's legally blind, he's still calling into these shows, so big props to Nick Baby Love. But at number 2, in terms of the tight end rankings, Gary, we have your Buffalo Bills. Why do we put them there?
Well, primarily it's Charles Clay. I think Charles Clay is, we could say he's the third best tight end in the division behind Bennett and Gronkowski, but really he does a lot, Kyle. Besides being a tight end guy, he can line up in the backfield. He is very, very fast for a tight end, Kyle. I mean, we've seen him take the Texans game, primarily take a seam route, take it all the way to the house. And he's very nifty with the ball when the ball is in his hands. He's not one of those tight ends that catches the ball and as soon as he gets tackled, he's down the ground. He's a violent runner. No doubt that Charles Clay is the third best tight end in the league. I mean, the league, the division.
Yeah,
I hope he's the third. I hope he's the third best tight end in the league. That'd be something, but no.
I mean, he. Do you think that he's even better than Bennett? I mean, certainly his contract says that he's better than Bennett.
I think he has the potential to be. The thing is this, Kyle, and this was a huge thing, and Greg Roman actually pointed this out today, is that we all know, it's well documented, that Tyrod Taylor did not use the middle of the field quite often last year. And most of Clay's routes were in the middle of the field, and he was open quite often. So they made a huge effort to get that, that factor of them being comfortable with each other in the middle of the field and in routes. So I think that's going to be a huge portion of the Bills' passing attack, is seeing a lot of Charles Clay in the middle through traffic, middle screens, the whole 9 yards. So, yeah, he could be better than Bennett, but it really boils down to the quarterback situation.
Yeah, and I like what you brought up before. When you think of some of Charles Clay's most effective plays last year is when he had the ball in his hand. You know, this guy, think back to that Week 3 matchup in Miami. I mean, he broke like 4 tackles on way to the end zone. So he's certainly an impressive player, and you want to see him be utilized in a better way this season. And I think that Buffalo will make a concerted effort to do so. At number 3, we had the Miami Dolphins. And, when I was on Let's Talk Jets last week, they actually asked me about the tight end rankings, and I listed off the same exact order as I have right now. And I said, as much as me as a Jets fan, I'm not impressed by what Miami has, and I'd like to rank the Jets higher. The reality is Jets tight ends as a whole last year might have reeled in maybe 9 passes, 12 passes. That's it. Jordan Cameron has some type of resume. He caught 10 touchdowns a couple of years ago. Now, while he was a huge disappointment last year, and he's actually been quite disappointing thus far in camp, just because of his resume, that alone, when you compare that to what the Jets have and what the Jets tight ends have not done, you have to put Miami at number 3.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I like Deion Sims. I think he's a good blocking tight end, and he gives you something in the passing game. Not a lot, but better than backup tight ends like we got, like Kellen Davis and Jim Dre. He at least gives you a little bit something more than those guys. So that alone says something right there.
Yeah, when I went to Jets training camp practice, not last week, but the week before that, I was only there for 30 minutes. And, I was tweeting out, one of the things that I got to tweet out is, Kellen Davis drops a pass, and I put unsurprisingly in parentheses because I was not surprised to see that at all. The dude, let me just say this. It makes it extremely predictable. You put him in, he should not go out for a route. He should never be a receiving option. The problem then is that when he's in, he's just going to be in to run block. And at that point, or pass block for that matter, but at that point, aren't you better suited just putting in an extra offensive lineman to block instead of him? But anyway, I digress. The Jets are at number 4. You hope that they, Jay Samara, he's slimmed down. He's been looking pretty good in camp. You'd like to think and hope that he can be better than Jordan Cameron, but he's still unproven, so there's no way that we can rank him above Quincy Enunwa. We're going to see him a lot more at receiver this year than H-back, even though he was still placed H-back because he was good in that role.
Yeah. I could tell you this right now. I mean, the Amaro thing, I'm kind of curbing my enthusiasm for him because his first season with the Jets, he looked good during their camp as well. A little lost in the playbook, but he still wound up leading all tight ends, and actually he was third that year in drops. So my question is his hands as well. He's definitely looked good, but we're in practice right now, and like I said, as far as I think Jets fans need to pump their brakes and their enthusiasm until we get into the season, and we see how Amaru plays after that. And Kyle, I agree with you. I think it's kind of pointless keeping a blocking tight end on the roster. We got a guy by the name of Jim Dre. He's a blocking tight end. You got Kellen Davis. He's a blocking tight end. You're not fooling much teams when he's out there. I'd rather get a really athletic lineman in there that could possibly catch a pass than have a tight end who's maybe not as strong and as physical as an offensive lineman when you're doing run blocking. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, you can't tell me that Kellen Davis is a better blocker than a 300-pound offensive lineman. You just can't. So, anyway, that's going to do it for this edition of the AFC East Bros podcast, episode number 57. Kyle and Gary, the AFC East Bros. You can call in at 712-451-0011. You want to listen to the show live on Tuesday evenings? Well, we have a link. You can find that in Twitter. You can also find that in the description for this show on YouTube and whatever podcast medium that you're downloading. Email the show, afceastbros@gmail.com. We thank you so much for listening as always, and we are out. We'll see you next time. I forgot to mention earlier Gary and I's Twitter handles. You can follow me on Twitter at AFC East Bros and Gary's AFC_East Bro Gary. That is the best way to interact with us. We may be doing more things, like creating a Facebook group. I mean, nothing's in the works of that as of yet. I mean, you guys, you're our listeners out there. If you feel like that'd be a way that you want to interact with us, well, let us know. Give us some feedback. Because as of right now, we're not sure if we want to do something like that. But Twitter is always the best way to interact with us. Make sure you follow us on there. And also, our show is now on YouTube. All episodes will also be uploaded there. And obviously, it's going to be a podcast. I mean, that's what we are. We're a podcast. You download, you listen to it on the go. That'll never stop. But another avenue we're looking to expand on YouTube. You can send that to your pops. If it's an easier way for him to download it, doesn't know how to work a smartphone, you can send it to anyone. It's just another avenue, and we're going to be trying to do more things on that channel as well. But yeah, thanks for listening to another episode of the AFC East Bros podcast.